This is a short video on how to change data inside of a multidimensional array. As we saw in a previous video, I can define an array, add another array to it, populate that array, and print out the information associated with that array. But let's say I want to change the data in an array. Now, I can do that in a few different ways. First of all, I can simply use the accessors or the indices, and I can say my multi-list, which is my multi-dimensional list, and then I put an open square bracket which indicates the row. It's always row wise. Let's say I want to change the cell at 1, 0 to say changed. And that's all I have to do. So at row 1, at column 0, so the cell that intersects those, I am going to say that has changed. Now I am simply going to copy the print statement so that we can compare them. And what we see here is we see row 1, cell 0 has been changed to the word changed. All of the other ones are the same. Now we can also do this from a perspective of a for loop. Let's say first of all that I want to have 5 rows, but I want to have 10 columns, because they don't have to be the same. The matrix can be any number of rows by any number of columns. And instead of populating this with a string that says rows, columns, I'm going to instead populate it with row counter. Actually, let's do plus. Row counter plus column counter. So we're going to populate it with a bunch of different numbers. So let's see what happens when I run it as it is now. Okay? Oops, my bad. I have a syntax error because I didn't change this. So this is always going to be rows, and this is going to be columns. One thing to remember is when you are using for loops on a multidimensional list, you are always starting with the row first. That's going to be your outer for loop. And then for each row, you will then evaluate the column. So next you're basically going to roll through the column. So now let me try running this. And what you will see is that I have the first set of printouts here is just everything as it was calculated. And the second set of printouts here is everything as calculated except I've changed something. So this is also very interesting because what it tells me is that I can store strings and integers in the same list. It doesn't matter what the data type is. It doesn't matter if it's a float, it doesn't matter if it's a string, it doesn't matter if it's a list, it doesn't matter if it's another list. So now I'm going to just comment this out for a second. And what if I wanted to make a decision based on the value? Well, let's do this. Let's do the same check that I did previously. I'm going to say for row in range, length of multi-list, and then I'm going to say, let's say row counter here. And then here I'm going to say for column counter in range 0. Now I need to figure out, well, how long is that? Well, here's what I can do. This will be very different. For row in my multi-list. Whoops. So here's a different way of doing a for loop. And this might come in handy at some point in time. And basically what I'm doing is I'm saying for row, and row is just a variable name, in multi-list. So instead of counting through the each individual row, I'm getting the whole row as a list. So if I printed row here, I would get the whole row. So that means that I can do len row. So let's just, the last one's not going to be right. Oops, my bad. My bad, I forgot my colon again. I shouldn't do that. So let's just run current and we'll do this as a quick exercise. So actually what I'm going to do is, this is getting a little bit too much with the print statements. So I'm going to comment out some of these print statements so that it's not as busy to read. So let me run current. Whoops, what did I do? Counter is not defined. Okay. So I'm just going to change this a bit to print column counter. For right now. We're going to change that in just a minute. So here, what I have, and what's important here is this. What I am doing here, and that directly relates to this line of code, is I'm getting the whole row. So when I get the whole row, I don't have to worry about counting through each element in the row at this point. I can just get the whole row. And then what I can do, because this makes syntax a little easier, I can print row of column counter. More importantly, I can say if row of column counter, oh, let me get rid of the parentheses, writing in Java, modulo 2 is 0, then I'm going to say row of column counter even. Okay, and then when I'm all done, I'm going to go back and I'm going to print everything out. And let's see what happens. Let's see if all my even numbers are changed to the word even. So let's run current, see if I have any syntax errors. I do not. And lo and behold, everything that was an even number is now changed to the word even. So what I have shown in this particular example is how to access and change information in a multidimensional array or a multidimensional list. So this has been a short video on how to access and change information in multidimensional lists.